Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Joe Harrison, the graphic designer and video producer. Once again, returning to guest host this pre-taped episode of TVLR. So we're going to be going over a selection of some of our favorite clips from this past year, but they are all going to be themed along one specific topic, though we do have a couple of brand new interviews that will be thrown into the mix as well, so you'll definitely want to stick around for that. But we're going to jump right into our first collection of clips. So, the theme for tonight's episode, as you probably already know, because it's probably on the thumbnail that I created for this and the title and all of that, is the Department of Government Efficiency, and more specifically, its spectacular collapse. So basically, we wanted to use this as an opportunity to remind y'all that we told you so, that this so-called Department of Government Efficiency was just almost certain to end in some sort of complete and catastrophic failure, which it did. And we were one of the only people on the radio here in this area that were saying that, because of course we share the airwaves with predominantly, conservative and right-wing talk shows, and most of them were, hyping up what DOGE was doing, and we're getting all excited about it. And meanwhile, we were just over here being like, I don't think that you should be quite excited about where this is going. So yeah, we want to just, sort of make our case that we were in fact right. So we have compiled a collection of our coverage of DOGE from the last year. So we're going to jump right into our first couple of clips, and I hope you enjoy.
The whole DOGE theory of government is that it is inefficient, it's rife with fraud. The people who do the work there are lazy government bureaucrats. They don't care about the mission. They don't care about anything. They're low productivity, stuff like that. And there were two really kind of fascinating stories last week of DOGE failures. And I want to start with one about Social Security, where Elon Musk and one of his DOGE bros makes a claim about how common fraud is within the Social Security system. Let's play this clip.
We learned 40% of the phone calls that they get are from fraudsters.
40%?
That's right. Almost half.
Yes, and they steal people's Social Security is what happens. Is they call in, they say, they claim to be a retiree, then they convince the Social Security person on the phone to change where the money's flowing. It actually goes to some fraudster. This is happening all day, every day. And then somebody doesn't receive their Social Security. It's because of all the fraud loopholes in the Social Security system.
All the fraud loopholes. And so they went and, it's amazing that they had the gall to say, oh, we found this, as if this is something that they had determined, actually. Well, based on that kind of hypothesis, 40% of calls into Social Security are fraudulent. They installed anti-fraud checks for benefit claims made over the phone early last month. And now the Social Security Administration is already considering walking back that policy because out of 110,000 calls that have been placed since the anti-fraud check was implemented, they found two cases that had a high probability of being fraudulent. Not even two cases that were determined to have been fraudulent, but two cases that had a high probability of being fraudulent. This is reporting coming out of nextgov.com. The title of the article is DOGE went looking for phone fraud at SSA and found almost none. Staff reporter Natalie Ames reported on the news story, but it is just so amazing that this is the kind of stuff that they're finding, and people are still believing this. Like, I saw a comment on Facebook from somebody that I know just last week about how she thinks that Elon Musk is trying to save the country when they're going out and either lying, they either lied about we determined that there are 40% of phone calls are fraudulent, or they are just so blatantly misinformed as to, almost be like a danger to themselves and others, physically, because they don't have the ability to kind of perceive reality and the world around them as it exists, really, right? I mean, that is so far from the mark. 40% was the claim. 2 calls out of 110,000 maybe was what they actually found. But that doesn't come at zero cost, right? Doing this anti-fraud measure, which is one of the things that people actually find frustrating with government, is all of the paperwork and all of the hoops that you have to jump through to get anything from the government, and all the requirements and blah, 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 right? That's actually the thing that makes government inefficient. A lot of the things, just like this one, are anti-fraud measures. And so you have to recognize that at some point, at a certain point, efficiency is an enemy of anti-fraud measures, right? And you have to do a cost-benefit analysis. You have to say, is it worth doing this anti-fraud check, or do we want to make it easier for folks who qualify to get their benefits that they have earned? Because this does not come at zero cost. What actually happened is that this anti-fraud measure slowed retirement claim processing by 25% for everybody, right? This is not just the 2 people who had potentially fraudulent claims. They're not the only ones that have to deal with this. Everybody had a 25% reduction in the speed with which their retirement claims were processed. It also led to a degradation of public service, according to an internal May document obtained by NextGov that examined potentially cutting the anti-fraud tool for phone claims. And so that's what you get. And also, it is worth noting that degradations to service are also benefit cuts. If it takes 25% longer and it takes 2 weeks or something, it takes 2 weeks for me to get my retirement claims started rather than 2 days, or it takes 4 weeks rather than 2 weeks, I have missed out on a check, right? I've missed out on a check. I will never get that check back. There is no procedure by which the government will retroactively pay me for what I would have been owed. You just lose that check indefinitely. It's a benefit cut. And it also makes government less efficient. It makes it more difficult. There is more friction between the acquisition of earned benefits on the part of beneficiaries, and there's more friction there with them getting that. It's just insane. And there was another story, too. That wasn't the only one. There was one of the Doge bros who gave an interview to Fast Company. Fast Company is a business publication. This Doge bro was the co-founder of Gumroad, some sort of tech thing. I don't know what Gumroad does. But he's supposed to be like a real fancy-smancy tech guy. He knows his tech stuff. That's this guy. His name is Sahil Lavingia. And he was put at the VA, the Veterans Affairs Administration. And and this interview is really just kind of fascinating, the things that it reveals about these people. And I would encourage folks to go read it themselves if they would like. The title of the interview is "Thanks to Doge, Gumroad's founder has a second job with the VA." The author is Ernie Smith. So check that out. Google it. Fast Company, Ernie Smith. It's a good article. And what this guy admits to Fast Company is really just fascinating. So he says, now that he's there, speaking about Langvia or whatever his name is, the DOGE guy at the VA, now that he's there, he says he finds himself surrounded by people who, quote, love their jobs, who came to the government with a sense of mission driving their work. This is what the tech startup DOGE guy is saying about employees at the VA. Quote, in a sense, that makes the DOGE agenda a little bit more complicated because if half the government took a buyout offer, then we wouldn't have to do much more, he says, implying software can replace departing employees. We'd just basically use software to plug the holes, but that's not what's happening. He says, the government works. He says there's a culture shock because it's a lot of meetings, not a lot of decisions, but honestly, quote, but honestly, it's kind of fine because the government works. It's not as inefficient as I was expecting, to be honest. I was hoping for more easy wins. You know, I mean, that's just an amazing admission. That really is just an amazing admission. Because that really is going counter to like the entire, the entire thing, the entire whole DOGE project. Because the whole DOGE project is built on a lie, right? It's not true. And then we got one right now. We've got this guy in the chat. True American, really 40%. I bet it's even higher. Why would you think that? Why would you think more than 40% of calls into the Social Security Administration are fraudulent? Like, on what basis do you have that belief? And then he says, oh, please, it's money laundering. That's not even what I am telling you that the DOGE freaks are saying. They created, it's not me. I didn't create this anti-fraud check, this anti-fraud measure. And so you can't say that, oh, well, look, Jacob created it and he's obviously got this bias against finding fraud. He wants all the fraud to exist because he's just a government guy, he loves government. This is the DOGE people created an anti-fraud check, and it found 2 calls out of 110,000 had a high probability of being fraudulent. And this guy is not believing it. Like, it's crazy. I'm telling him that the DOGE people are saying is wrong, and he's like, no, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Right? I mean, it's like crazy. Right. And you believe whatever you want with no evidence like yourself. Meanwhile, DOGE is actually showing evidence and has access to view the files. And you're not believing what DOGE is telling you. I don't know what, I don't know what to, that's crazy.
I mean, some people believe that, humans coexisted with dinosaurs. Some people believe
that's an easier thing to believe than this, because at least with the humans coexisting with dinosaurs, you can't just go and look at it, right? Or right now you can just go and look at this and say, you can suspend all sorts of disbelief to believe that humans and dinosaurs coexist and stuff like that. But this is just right here in your face. The guy who is who would be telling you the thing that you want to hear is telling you that you're wrong. And yeah, I don't know. So there you go. 2 more DOGE failures this week. They're going to keep racking up the failures, and people are going to keep believing that they're not failing. That's kind of the world that we live in right now. 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857 if you have any thoughts on that.
The good news is I think the vast majority of people do not believe it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's what we have to remember. Yeah, there are some knuckleheads out there who are going to believe all sorts of foolish things, but I think most people can see through it. It's just a matter of organizing folks.
Absolutely. Yeah, and most people are opposed. Most people are not even opposed to the mission of DOGE. They want government to be efficient, which who doesn't? I mean, there was this poll that was talking about, most people want the government to be more efficient. And it's like, well, I mean, what does that even mean?
Right. I mean, there's also polling that shows, over 70% of the American public opposes postal privatization.
Right.
But, in the eyes of some people, efficiency is privatization. So, it's a little more complicated than that, I think.
But when asked about DOGE specifically, how is it executing its mission, people are overwhelmingly dissatisfied with the job that they are doing, Republicans and Democrats. And so, people that don't see that are kind of in the minority. I'm going to be playing for you an interview that one of the senior DOGE people, a tech bro, a founder in Silicon Valley of some Gumroad, it's some company, I don't know even what they do, but supposedly it's a big deal. And he was one of the leaders of DOGE, and he has been unceremoniously fired recently. And he gave an interview to, it started when he gave an interview to somebody at Fast Company about it. And we talked about that. We covered that interview when it came out. We talked about how he said that, the government was not nearly as inefficient as I thought it was. And apparently he was fired without warning and without any justification or cause following that interview being made public. And so NPR talked to him both about his findings at DOGE and about why he was fired. So I'm going to play a few portions of this interview, but I want to start with his reasoning for joining the DOGE project, because DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, like that idea that I want government to be more efficient is an idea that a lot of people have in good faith and something that they actually would like to see progress on and that they would like to see executed. And it does seem to me like this fellow kind of was of that persuasion. He came into this project in good faith. He came into it not wanting to destroy the government, but wanting to make the government more efficient and more responsive to the needs of people. And that's not a bad thing. That's something that I would like to see as somebody who has been a federal employee for a long time. And so let's listen to this guy talk about why he joined DOGE.
I really believe that software can play a really important role in making being an American citizen like a better experience. People are frustrated with the tools and technology that they have to use when they interface with the U.S. federal government. And I've always been interested as a software engineer ever since I was like a sophomore in high school. It's hard for me to think of a better way to have a larger impact as someone who writes code every day and enjoys, designing and building products, web applications, iPhone applications than working for the US federal government. And Bernie, Hillary, Obama, Trump, it doesn't really matter to me if the work is making it easier to pay taxes or, making it easier for veterans to collect benefits. I like when my software gets used by a lot of people and people send me nice emails. In this case, people weren't sending me the nicest emails, unfortunately, but they also didn't really know what I was doing. They saw DOGE, weren't a fan of certain things that they were associated with. But I think at the end of the day, like the role of the U.S. Digital Service is to improve the UX of being an American, which is pretty exciting. And anyone who lets me do that, I will try to work for, even if my friends and family aren't huge fans.
And so there you go. Look, that's somebody who is entering this in good faith and wants to make it easier to pay taxes. Well, one of the things that DOGE did immediately after they got into the IRS and the Treasury Department was they're trying to eliminate the IRS's direct file program, which would allow you to, for free, go around TurboTax and H&R Block and be able to forego paying some tax collection company hundreds of dollars a year to pay your taxes, because guess what, folks? The government knows how much money you owe it, and it can just tell you that, right? And so one of the things that the Biden administration was trying to do was just to allow the government to tell you how much money you owe it. And guess what? The DOGE people, they decided to try to kill that program. They decided to try to kill that program because guess what? TurboTax doesn't want this direct file program to be available to citizens for free. They want to make it more difficult for people to pay taxes. They want to make it, and they want to be able to be a middleman, right? They want to be able to collect a rent, to collect a fee on you paying your taxes. And the Trump administration was like, okay, well, we're fine with that. That's fine. We're fine with, you talk about waste and inefficiency,
right? I mean, it's just totally ridiculous. And so, so he talks about, he talked some about like why he went into the DOGE project, why he wanted to be a part of this thing. And then, she asked him, well, what did you encounter while you were part of this project? Let's take a listen to this clip where he talks about his experience.
As you did more and more of this work in the time that you were involved with DOGE, did you find the federal bureaucracy to be rife with waste and fraud and abuse?
Frankly, no, I did not find the federal government to be rife with waste, fraud, and abuse. I was expecting some more easy wins. I was hoping for opportunity to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. And I do believe that there is a lot of waste. There's minimal amounts of fraud, and abuse to me feels relatively non-existent. And the reason is I think we have a bias as people coming from the tech industry, where we've worked at companies, such as Google, Facebook, these companies that have plenty of money, are funded by investors, and have lots of people kind of sitting around doing nothing. The government has been under sort of a magnifying glass for decades. And so I think generally, I personally was pretty surprised actually at how efficient the government was. This isn't to say that it can't be made more efficient. Elimination of paper, elimination of faxing, but these aren't necessarily fraud, waste, and abuse. These are just rooms to modernize and improve the U.S. federal government into the 21st century.
So listen to that. I want to just underscore why he came into this project with the idea that government was going to be incredibly inefficient. Did you catch that? He said, I thought the government would be so inefficient because I came from the private sector, where we've got a bunch of people who are being paid a bunch of money to really, frankly, sit around and do nothing. That was his experience in the private sector, in the tech industry. That's supposed to be like the cutting edge of capitalism, right? That's what we're told. The tech industry, cutting edge of capitalism. This is one of the most productive sectors of the economy. And this guy came into the government expecting the government to be more like the private sector and to have so much waste and abuse like what he came from. And he went into the government and he was like, oh, that doesn't actually exist. There's not actually a bunch of people sitting around doing nothing, getting paid big dollars to sit around and do nothing. And he said, obviously, like in any industry, there is room to make things more efficient. But what is the thing that is going to actually make the government more efficient? It is not cutting jobs. It is not making it more difficult for you to pay your taxes. It is not cutting this program or that project. It is modernizing the government and making it easier for you to pay taxes, making your interactions with the government more seamless and more convenient, right? And so that's, but that was not actually what the DOGE project was about. The DOGE project ultimately is about dismantling the ability of the state to regulate companies like Elon Musk's Tesla and SpaceX and his Twitter company, right? They don't want the government to be able to protect workers and consumers and citizens from oligarchs like Elon Musk. And so, it was a big failure. The DOGE project has basically been a big failure on the thing that it is selling to people, right? It's a big success in what it's actually been about. It's been a big success in making it more difficult for the federal government to protect workers and consumers and community members. But it has been a huge failure in doing actually what they sold to people, which was making government more efficient. It has not done that. And so, the question then is why? Why has it failed? And he answered that question in this clip.
When you did identify inefficiencies at the VA, I wonder, did you often identify the public interest reasons for why things might have been the way that they were?
Definitely. The sort of first thing that comes up anytime you question, why does a veteran's disability claim take 133 days on average to process? The answer is not because people are just sitting around doing nothing all day long. It's because there are a lot of rules and regulations that Congress has put in place over decades that just make it very, very complicated.
So there you go. Like, these things are complicated It's difficult work, and it's made complicated because of the restrictions that Congress has placed on these government agencies. It is not just that federal government bureaucrats have gone around creating these rules and regulations to make their jobs more difficult for no reason, because they love wasting people's time and wasting people's money. That's not actually why, to the extent that it is, the government is inefficient. It's inefficient because of Congress and things that Congress has done. And so, so he was talking about that, and then she asked, well, why were you fired then, right? I mean, you're talking about this. DOGE is supposed to be one of the most, Elon Musk says, maximally transparent. And yet this guy who was being transparent about his experience, he seemed to have a different view than Elon Musk, but he was being transparent. And so, why can't people with different views express what their experience has been? Well, let's listen to why he to what happened when he was fired.
Can you walk us through what happened before you were let go?
Yes. So I probably stupidly was asked by not even a journalist, but a writer who just has a blog about my business going open source. And I spoke to him. He had a bunch of questions about me working for DOGE, and I felt that Elon was pretty clear about how he wanted DOGE to be maximally transparent. That's something he said a lot in private and publicly. And so I felt, okay, cool. I'll take him at his word. I will be transparent and, sort of an ask forgiveness, not permission sort of thing. I said mostly that the government was not as inefficient as I was expecting. And then my access got revoked pretty shortly after. I didn't get notified. I was basically ghosted. And I just got an email notification that my access was no longer valid.
So there you go. I mean, that's pretty wild. Just the kind of brazenness of this sort of thing. And IRS employees are now talking about how these job cuts are going to make it more difficult to modernize the IRS. In the Government Executive, it's like a trade journal about federal agencies. They report that the IRS budget lists a nearly 60% reduction to IT and support staff in the coming fiscal year, from 10,300 people in 2025 to 4,250 employees. That means that the loss of 2,000 tech employees is only about half of what's to come. If all of those who signed up for the administration's delayed resignation offer are approved to leave and layoffs resume as anticipated, the overall IRS workforce reductions could bring the agency below 60,000 employees. That would mark a reduction of more than 40% since Trump took office. What is that going to do? It is going to make it more difficult for the IRS to modernize its technologies. It is going to, eliminate the direct file program. You are going to be forced to continue to pay hundreds of dollars to middlemen like TurboTax and things like this. And it is going to make it more easy for billionaires like Elon Musk to cheat on their taxes. When the IRA was passed with money to increase hiring at the IRS, there was a lot of fear mongering about, this is going to increase audits on normal working people. Well, the IRA has been law for a while now. The IRS did staff up for some amount of time before Trump came into office, and we have the data, and we can see that audits on working people, on people who make under like $500,000, did not go up even a fraction of a percent. You were no more likely to have been audited by the IRS if you are a normal person during the Biden administration than you were before. But guess what happened under the Biden administration? Audits for the top 1% increased significantly. And cutting the staff is going to make it more difficult for the IRS to do audits on people like Elon Musk. And so those audits are going to go down. We are going to lose significant revenue because people are going to cheat on their taxes. And that is ultimately, again, that's what the DOGE project was about. It was not about making the government better for you and for me. It was about making the government more subservient to oligarchs and kings. So there you go.
Yeah, and a couple things I wanted to mention before we wrap this segment up. You talked about those rules and regulations that complicate the work, that slows down the work. And I think it's worth pointing out that most of the time, those rules and regulations are designed to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse, right? The very thing that they're so obsessed with. And the other thing is that to the extent that there are opportunities to modernize, to make things more efficient, who knows better how to do that than the workers, right? The people who are actually in these jobs, the people who do the work every day. This is what they spend 40 hours or more a week doing. And so they can tell you which programs need to be updated. They can tell you which, technologies they're using are behind the times. They can do all of that. And rather than have constructive dialogue with the workers, they've declared war on their unions. And so there again, it's not about government efficiency, right? Because you can talk to, it doesn't matter what industry you're talking about, whether it's public sector, private sector. If you talk to rank and file workers, they can always identify areas of improvement. And that's something that always, irritates me about these fiercely anti-union employers. What they don't appreciate is if they actually sit down and talk with the workers and the union, they can often find ways to save money. They can often find ways to make more money, right? They can find ways to make operations better. But, again, their anti-union bigotry and hostility trumps all logic and facts.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio, from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Joe Harrison, graphic designer and video producer, once more filling in for Adam and Jacob today while they're out on holiday break. If you were with us last week, welcome back, and thank you for joining me as I guest host one more time. So we've been playing some of our DOGE coverage, that's the Department of Government Efficiency, to commemorate its demise, and we've got plenty more for you. As always, even though this is a pre-tape, we would love to hear your reactions. You can leave us a voicemail anytime throughout the week. The number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Or you can also use the contact form on our website, tvlr.fm/contact. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time we end here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, once again, tvlr.fm. But of course, we're also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. And again, also on Twitch now, which is pretty cool. As always, I just want to take a quick opportunity to remind you that your support keeps us on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, and we simply could not do this without you. So if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. As always, we've also got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. Also, if you are a member of a union, you should get your local, district council, or international union to sponsor the show. And you can reach out to us for more details on that. And of course, let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you are on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, WMSP, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are, of course, always proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, and we definitely encourage our listeners to check that out. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class, especially here in the American South. And we're hoping that this project can make a difference on that front, and we simply can't do this without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you are a loyal fan or first-time listener, and even a hater. Yes, we even appreciate you as well. We appreciate all of you spending time with us today. So, now that the Trump administration has admitted that DOGE was an unmitigated failure and closed up shop, we thought it would be worthwhile to share some of our contemporaneous thoughts on the project. So this next clip is from all the way back in May.
So, friend of the show, Michael Yaffe.
Is that what we're calling him?
That's right. He's another radio host on one of the stations that we are on, or two of the stations. We share two stations with Michael. And he had a tweet that I disagreed with, where he was saying that DOGE is one of the most important things that the government has done in his lifetime. And I thought that was crazy. So I tweeted about it. And here he is on his radio station reading my tweet and reacting to it.
I know that the guys, Jacob Morrison and the guys with the Valley Labor Report are criticizing me today on social media. If you want to like the Yaffe Facebook page or follow me on X at Yaffe, you can see this. It's on X. You might remember yesterday I talked about DOGE. And my main point was to criticize Congress because I like DOGE, but I think if we really need to cut spending, cut the size of government, Congress is going to have to play a role. And I said this, I said, I still believe DOGE might be one of the most important things done in government in my lifetime, but where the hell is Congress? I love everything Elon Musk has done, but he can only do so much. It seems Congress was willing to stand back and do nothing while Musk and Trump took all the arrows. With all the good work by DOGE, we still have barely scratched the surface on what needs to be cut. So my main point was to criticize of Congress, but the Valley Labor Report, which you can hear on this station on the weekends, they said this.
That's right.
They said, folks really do live in totally different worlds. He said, in the real world, DOGE is an unmitigated failure. No real waste, fraud, abuse found. Those are crimes. Now, I want to point out, and maybe this is what they meant, waste is not a crime necessarily. There's a lot of waste in government that was legal, but still wasteful. So I do have to point that out. He says it misrepresents what line items it has cut. It's also extremely unpopular. And I responded to this. By the way, it's not extremely unpopular. There are parts of it that are popular. The majority of people do want to cut waste and cut the size of government.
So there you go. We're going to talk about like the substance of it, but I want to spend just a little bit of time on the is it popular? And so if you ask people, should we make government efficient? Like everyone thinks that we should make government efficient. The question is, how do you do that? Is DOGE doing that? What does that mean? What does being efficient mean? Does being efficient mean you cut the size of government, or does that mean that you empower government to act in the world? Right? I think that's what being an efficient government means. The New Deal government was an efficient government because we empowered the government to do things, to go out into the world and build. I mean, it is amazing how many public parks exist today because of the Works Progress Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps that was set up during the New Deal. That was an efficient government, right? And so what does that mean? But, the questions, is DOGE doing a good job? Do not poll well, because everybody is seeing that what DOGE is about is not actually about government efficiency. It's not about making sure that what government does, it can do well. It is about demolishing the capacity of the state, which is a different project than making it efficient. And people don't like that. People think if the government is going to be doing something, it should be doing it efficiently. And so here is Byron Donalds, just I'll go through a couple more poll numbers here in a second, but as a real life illustration of this, here's Byron Donalds at a super restrictive town hall event. Let me go through, just before we play this clip, all of the restrictions on attendance at this town hall. And then I want you to listen to the audience because it's pretty crazy. So this is a town hall that you had to be pre-registered for like 3 days in advance. Registration ended on Friday, April 18th for the event on Monday, April 21st. Okay. So, you had to pre-register. Only 700 tickets were guaranteed. only voting constituents of Byron Donalds' districts were even eligible. If you are a constituent but you didn't vote, you are not eligible. Family members, guests may bring up to 4 family members from the same household. Okay, so you're not able to bring a bunch of people with you. And guests must arrive between 4:30 and 5:30 p.m. to secure their spot for an event that starts at 6:30. To be able to enter, you have to have an email confirming that you were that you were able to enter. You have to have a Florida ID matching the address in the district. And for out-of-state IDs, the team had to verify your district voter registration. Okay, so, look, this is not a bunch of paid protesters coming in from California and New York. All right, let's listen to this question that was asked and how the audience responded.
Okay, so the first question comes to us from Susan Sutton from Fort Myers. Susan?
Susan? Oh, hey Susan, how you doing?
All right, Susan, as a member of the Oversight Committee, what oversights are you imposing on Elon Musk and DOGE?
Great question. I guess they like that question.
Okay, so what the question was, if you couldn't hear it, as a member of the Oversight Committee, what oversight are you putting on Elon Musk and DOGE? Okay, and the reaction from that was very obviously that they don't like what Elon Musk and DOGE is doing. And he tries to answer this. Here's him responding in part to that question and another question about Elon Musk and DOGE.
Elon Musk and DOGE have been authorized by the President of the United States. Don't leave. Are you ready? You ready for the other half of it? The previous president, President Biden. So you do not want to hear the full story. You don't want to hear the full story. Allow me to educate and bring you the full story. And when you're ready, I'm going to tell you, because I don't want you to yell and not hear the full story. Because you're not listening. You're listening. Here we go. I'm going to tell you the full story.
So there you go. And like I said, we're going to get into some of the substance, but that's just to illustrate DOGE is not popular. Also, to help you illustrate, he won that district 70-30 in 2024. 3 months ago, or 4, 5, 6 months ago, right? So this is not, a bunch of New York libs. Here's some other polls. Plus 14%, like most people by 14 points think that government is inefficient. Even 6 plus 6 is the reaction to DOGE is a good idea. Right? And so there is a real feeling, or there has been generated a feeling among the American public that there needs to be some sort of project to make government more efficient. And yet, even with this, you could not ask for a better place from which to start this project, right? If you are somebody that actually wanted to make government more efficient, you could not start from a place of more charity from the American people, right? A plus 14 point positive on government is inefficient, plus 6 point even on DOGE is a good idea, right? So that must mean something when in the same poll, people are saying, in reaction to the statement, DOGE is doing a good job, -12. -12 points, DOGE is doing a good job. -18 points, Musk is doing a good job with DOGE, right? This is in the same poll, people are saying this is a good idea, but wow, they are screwing it up. So you got to be able to reckon with that if this is actually your project. Only 30% of people say it should continue at the pace that it's continuing now. 30 people say that the idea is needed, but they need to slow down and actually, do a project of government efficiency. And then 30 to 40% of people say it's reckless, or 30% of people say it's reckless and should stop now. 4% of people say there's no need to cut the federal government. 60% of people disapprove of the job that DOGE is doing. 57% of voters, including 16% of Republicans, said that Musk has too much power in decisions that affect the country. Right? So, talk about the substance here in a second, but I think it is accurate to say extremely unpopular. If that's not extremely unpopular, I don't know what is extremely unpopular if that's not. Okay, let's continue listening to Yaffe.
Believe it or not, Valley Labor Report hasn't changed my mind. Is DOGE perfect? No. But it's putting us on a path of fundamentally changing the role of the federal government in our lives. I said the tech upgrades they're pushing is a plus as well.
And so what I said to that, I did respond to that, but it was after this segment aired. And so I said that, it's not really so much about, did Yaffe change his opinion? It's, can Yaffe discern reality from fan fiction, right? I mean, that's where we're at, right? If, because it's not, I don't think at this point it's a matter of opinion. Is DOGE doing a good job? It's just do you agree with that statement or not is a reflection of your ability to perceive the world as it exists, not as you want it to be. Okay, let's continue.
And it wasn't that long ago where the DOGE team members went on Fox News with Brett Baer and were outlining all of just the crazy stuff that goes on in our government. Now, you can go to the doge.gov website as well and just see. Let me give you some examples of what's going on today. And this is why I think it's so important. You have this from Secretary Brooke Rollins out of the USDA. He says, at my direction, the USDA has taken action to ensure illegal aliens do not receive federal benefits by hardworking taxpayers. They also posted something.
Wow, that's interesting. Adam, did you realize that undocumented immigrants are just being given SNAP? Did you know that they were eligible for that before the Trump administration?
I hadn't heard that. I mean, I guess not that I'm aware of.
Oh, hold on. I'm being told that's not true.
Oh.
Actually, undocumented immigrants have never been eligible for SNAP.
Well, that's why I hadn't heard it, I guess.
Interesting. Also, a Government Accountability Office report detailing and describing improper payments that were issued under the SNAP program. This detailed report that goes through all of the ways, how are improper payments happening? What are some ways that we can fix it? Do you know if that report was issued by DOGE?
I don't know.
It was not. It was not. It was issued by the Government Accountability Office. Was that report issued during the Trump administration or during the Biden administration?
It's pretty quick to be in the Trump administration.
Well, I mean, these DOGE guys are really efficient, though.
True, they're moving fast. I don't know. Well, surely Trump's done that already.
No, it was the Biden administration that issued a 20-page report on improper SNAP payments, how they happen, and how to fix it. Let's continue.
It said the Department of Justice has started cutting millions of dollars in wasteful grants. Some of the greatest hits include national listening sessions of individuals with lived experience. Now, we could also talk about what the cuts to USAID. And I will admit one thing. In real dollars, what Elon Musk has cut through DOGE isn't as much as needs to be cut. That's why I was saying Congress needs to do something, because the fact that DOGE could cut on its own, it's just not possible. But the reason why I think DOGE is more important is looking at the big picture, which I like to do. Looking at the big picture, it is at least is getting us to think differently.
Okay, let's pause for a second here. This is really interesting. I didn't look at this before, but the listening sessions that he was mentioning, that is about crime victims. So there were listening sessions for crime victims, and the goal looks like it was about how do we make sure that crime victims are taken care of, and how do we support these crime victims' families. And so that actually seems like it would be a Trump administration thing, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, from what I hear, they're really concerned about crime, right? And so conceivably, you would be concerned about the victims of the crimes, and you'd want to hear from them. You'd want to listen to them and know what their experience has been like, and how the government could be better serving them, right? That's a joke. Also, how much money was really spent on that? Like, give me a break when we spend how much on so many other things. And so, like, the whole idea of, oh, waste, fraud, and abuse. Like, is there waste, fraud, and abuse? Yeah, but it's not the stuff you're talking about, right? You want to get into the war machine and the military-industrial complex? Now we're talking, but that's not where they want to look.
And let's dwell on this. The dollar value of the cuts has not been that much. 2% of the federal budget, $160 billion, and that is if the current estimates are true, which I do not believe they are. Let's remember that they had previously detailed an $8 million cut as an $8 billion cut, right? And folks were constantly, I mean, this is not a small thing, right? This is not a small thing. If you are constantly misrepresenting by orders of magnitude both the quantity and the quality of the things that you are saying that you're cutting, this is not something that is good for the government. And so as people continue to find out how they were misrepresenting both the amount of the cuts and actually what they were, DOGE has become less and less and less transparent, and they are making it less and less and less easy for people to actually go back and see what they're doing and see what it is actually that they are cutting. Additionally, they're saying that they have saved $160 billion, but a new analysis from a nonpartisan research and advocacy group estimated that DOGE's actions will actually cost $135 billion this fiscal year. They do this by seeking to tally the costs associated with putting tens of thousands of federal employees on paid leave, by rehiring mistakenly fired workers, by losing productivity, and more. The Partnership for Public Service is a nonpartisan nonprofit that focuses on the federal workforce. They estimate that estimate is based on the $270 billion in annual compensation for federal workforce. Calculating the impact of DOGE's actions from paid leave to productivity hits, the $135 billion cost to taxpayers does not include the expense of defending multiple lawsuits challenging DOGE's actions, nor the impact of estimated lost tax collections due to staff cuts at the IRS, which that alone is estimated to cost in uncollected revenue $500 billion. $500 billion in lost revenue because of the IRS staff cuts. Let's continue.
Important branding to look at a lot of stuff that goes on in our government, and we have to ask ourselves, why? Why do we have all this stuff? And a lot of what they're cutting and a lot of the efficiency they're doing isn't necessarily about cutting real dollars. It's just about cutting stuff the government doesn't need that just screws up our economy or whatever it is. But they've also talked about how some of the computer systems that these bureaucracies use are old and outdated. We talked about how when it comes to retirement, it takes months for a government employee to retire because they have to get documents and put it in Iron Mountain and all that, and that needs to change, it needs to be upgraded. All of that I think is good, and I think it's important.
So, it's good to make systems more efficient, but a lot of times that actually takes, and to update files and stuff like that, but that actually takes initial expenditures to be able to move from systems that currently work to new, more efficient systems, importantly, without disrupting service. Because, you know, what he did at Twitter, I think is very obviously has affected the, the ability of the platform to work as a platform. It's much more glitchy than it used to be. But ultimately, if Twitter is more glitchy than it used to be, that's not a big problem. If people don't get their Social Security checks, that's a big problem. And that's actually why, like, the Social Security Administration, for example, did not update its files because, you know, and one of the things that they were talking about at the beginning of DOGE was, oh, there's 140-year-olds collecting Social Security. It's just simply not true. It's simply not true. The only reason that it looks like there are people in the system that are 150 years old is there's like some COBOL is like the coding language that the Social Security Administration uses. And so whenever they don't have a birth date for somebody or a death date for somebody, that it like defaults to this date that's like 150 years ago. But the Social Security Administration automatically stops payments at 120 years old. And the Social Security Administration's improper payments are something like 1%. It is ridiculously low. And they knew that there were people that had died that were in the Social Security system that were not getting paid. Most importantly, these people were not getting paid, but their name still showed up in the system. And what was determined, like people knew about this, but it was determined that it would be less efficient to actually update the files because they weren't getting paid. They were never going to be paid because you can't issue payments to people that are over 120 years old in the system. And so it was just more efficient to just leave them there because they didn't realize that there would be somebody who would go out in bad faith, you know, fearmonger about this kind of stuff, right? So if you actually just want to update just for the sake of having a clean file system, you have to have appropriations from Congress to do that. And they don't have, the Social Security Administration wasn't able to do that with the operating funds. And, you know, speaking of, like, what is the mission of DOGE? You know, I posit that the mission of DOGE is actually just simply to undercut state capacity, to make it more difficult for the government to be able to inhibit people like Elon Musk, to make it easier for people like Elon Musk to get away with tax fraud and things like that, right? And so if that is actually the mission, as opposed to making the government more efficient, what you would anticipate when they come in is not questions about the systems and technically how do these systems work and learning from people. You would anticipate questions like how people were interrogated at the IRS. This is Maurice Vinton, who used to work at the U.S. Digital Service, which is what was turned into DOGE before the Trump administration. And this is how she said that the DOGE people interrogated folks at the IRS and the U.S. Digital Service on in an interview with the Majority Report.
All 162 USDS employees were brought in for 15-minute interviews. So we were kind of at first trial run of what it's like to interview 162 people in a day. And the people, you know, we were told these are new teammates that are excited to meet us. And what we were met with was people who would only provide their first names. If you'd ask a follow-up question, like, what brings you to government? You were which was, this actually happened not to me, but to my coworker. They were told this is a one-way conversation only. I mean, that's not a very threatening question. What makes you excited to be here? So that first set of interactions really set the tone for this new.
What kind of questions did they ask you?
Oh, they were, who is your favorite person at the U.S. Digital Service? Who's your favorite teammate? What makes you exceptional? What's your favorite product that you've worked on in government? It was so quick, and also the questions didn't, to me, really seem to be with people who understood what they were getting into. And government is, as you said, complex. There's a lot of systems, there's things to know. And asking me who my favorite teammate is doesn't really, I think, talk to the scale of the complexity of what we were trying to do. And what we do every day.
Was it was it your sense that they were looking for social networks so that in the event I mean, when I hear those questions, it is almost like a bizarro world union organizer. Because sussing out the social networks there, who are the people that I can, where are the, once I establish some type of marker, maybe it doesn't come from you, but if I know that you're friends with, Bill and Mary, and I find out from Mary that she likes NPR or something, then I know that Bill and you may be a problem.
That's a really great question and a really great theory I'd never really thought about or we discussed. We didn't really know what the purpose was.
So I think that's interesting and should inform like how we perceive how these people view their mission, right? Do they view their mission as actually improving government, making it more efficient, empowering civil servants to do their jobs, or do they see it as destroying the state? I think that should inform how we view these people. And another thing that should inform is what products and what services they try to cut. Vinton talks about some of that here.
When I joined the IRS as a detailee on loan from USDS in 2022, all of my IRS colleagues talked about was how little capacity they had or ability they had to answer the phones. Only 12% of phone calls were answered. And there were these front page that year. There were these front page stories in national news with photos of paper backlogs, so people's tax returns at processing centers in the Midwest. And with the Inflation Reduction Act, there was a lot of hiring, a lot of new technology investment that went to reduce that paper backlog and to increase the ability for the IRS to answer calls. And we got it up to 88% the next year, which is heroic that even was possible. So when you ask what they're cutting that capacity. I really worry about what it's going to look like next year during filing season, what the wait times are going to be. This year, a lot of the filing season efforts were kind of held off from the initial probationary firings, but I know that there are RIFs coming now that filing season is over. And so that's, I'm sorry, reduction in force. So that is the process by which people are being fired or placed on an administrative leave. So not working, laid off. So I worry about next filing season. That's on the taxpayer side. On the call center side, when you get to the higher audits, go ahead.
Yeah, before we get to the audits, I just also want to make it clear that when the response time, when the backlog increases, when the phone calls don't go answered, that is a cost borne by the citizen. And to be clear, it's a cost borne by the people probably in the top 75 percentile of earnings. Above that, they have accountants who are waiting on the phone. They have, H&R Block that's waiting on the phone, or they're not having to do it. So the cost associated to, wealthier people is less. It doesn't inhibit their productivity. They don't have to take time off from work. They don't have to use their day off or whatever it is.
That's exactly right. I mean, I remember I was at a shop in Pennsylvania, and a woman said, she didn't know where I worked. She was just talking to her friend and said she'd been on the phone on hold for 7 hours the previous day, and she had to finally hang up. So that's an example of what it was like. And there were plans to have better technology to make it so that it was less reliant on, so many call center agents. There are ways to make it all more efficient. And we were all going in that direction. But unfortunately, never got there. And that capacity and that team has been cut on the compliance side. So effectively what the Inflation Reduction Act did was to kind of rebuild a whole bunch of the capacity to go after and to explore those larger, more complex cases. Obviously, it did happen, but not at the scale and the pace of which these large corporations or high net wealth individuals were growing. And those were there were probationary firings in February. Roughly 7,000 people were let go. Probationary means they were new, right? So new talent hired in the last 2 years.
New talent or promoted talent.
Yes. So you're like your brand new excited teammates, and also the ones that had achieved a lot of really great work. Within the IRS, the teams that do that auditing, it was 90% their teams that were impacted. So of the 7,000 people, roughly 6,700 were fired during the probationary firings. And I expect that ratio to continue as they go through more layoffs. So it's just, I don't know what next season is going to look like in terms of, the call center, but also in the IRS's ability to explore those large cases.
90% of the departments that do these large cases, auditing wealthy people like Elon Musk, have been eliminated. How do you hear things like that and still believe that this is a good faith project? I really don't understand that. And here's another illustration staying with the IRS. The direct file program is another thing that the IRS is moving to eliminate. Let's listen to how she describes the direct file program and what's happening there.
So DOGE has indicated that they want to shut direct file down. And that has been devastating news. It was reported by the AP last week that is their intent. They've not confirmed that, but it was definitely where the conversation was going when I was still inside, actually, frankly. And unfortunately, that continued. Again, there didn't seem to be a lot of logic behind it. Direct file is a startup. It is a startup within government. We thought that there would be some interest there. Maybe there was a Venn diagram of efficient products that people love, interest in that, and there wasn't at all, apparently. So it takes a lot of trust with states, a lot of relationship building with states, and there had been no conversations with states as well. So unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be another line item that they've just decided to cut. And the direct file team, I'm not sure what their future is. They don't know what their future is. And, it's really just devastating for not just taxpayers. I think it's also devastating for the IRS itself. That team was so talented, is so talented.
Do you have a sense of how it worked this filing season?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the Net Promoter Score is a very common private sector kind of promoter or score index that says how much people like your product or not. So last year, direct files was plus 74. It's astronomically high. Apple's is 72. Wow. This year it was 84, plus 84. So somehow the Net Promoter Score, which was already inordinately high, got even higher. Direct file users, it increased their trust in the IRS by 86%. So you can actually increase trust in government when you deliver really great things that they love. So it went really well this year. There were no bugs. Everyone that used it loved it. Some of the feedback that people gave.
That's amazing to me. Yeah. That is amazing to me. In the best of times that you would have a product rollout that was so effective, but I would imagine that everybody associated with that was preoccupied to some degree with the idea of is this going to exist tomorrow? Do I have a job tomorrow? Am I at 8 p.m.? Am I going to get a notice that I'm fired? And yet the thing was that successful.
You're absolutely right. That's what it was like for that team all filing season. And people were openly speculating. Elon Musk had tweeted a confusing tweet in February that led some people to believe that direct file had been shut down. It hadn't been shut down. It was doing great. And so all throughout filing season, the team just had to focus on delivering more features. They rolled out So an internet meme had always been, why doesn't the IRS just tell me how much I owe? Instead, they ask me, I get it wrong, and they throw me in jail. And the direct files team started to input what the IRS knew about you into the tax return. It started to do that pre-population, and people loved it, and it worked. The IRS was using that as a use case for its modernization efforts. And so it is just really, and that happened during filing season. So it's just really a devastating situation for the team and for taxpayers.
I mean, seriously, IRS direct file, just to explain a little bit more about it, that just means you don't have to go through like H&R Block or TurboTax or anything like that. That is such a common sense thing that it is absurd that it is not the standard, right? Why should I have to pay a private company a bunch of money to do my taxes for me when the government knows how much I owe it? Like, why can't the government just tell me? If you cared about an efficient government, you would do that. You would just have the government tell you what you owe it. And the Biden administration was trying to do that. And you would think that if Elon Musk actually cared about an efficient government, he would be supporting this program, but he doesn't care about that. He wants to destroy the government. So, here's a couple of other things that the DOGE team has cut. USAID, I know that people don't like USAID, and people don't like you bringing up that children have died because of it, but it's true. Abdo, an 18-month-old boy, had been rushed to a clinic, this is in the New York Times, had been rushed to a clinic by his mother as he was dying. His ribs protruded from his withered body. The next day, a doctor laid him out on a blanket with a teddy bear motif, his eyes closed. Like the other 11 children, Abdo starved to death in the weeks after President Trump froze all U.S. foreign assistance, said local aid workers and a doctor. American-funded soup kitchens in Sudan, including the one near Abdo's house, had been the only lifelines for tens of thousands of people besieged by fighting. So that's another thing that they've cut. They've literally killed... I mean, you can think that's not politically correct or that's like improper or uncouth of me to say, but it's true. Elon Musk's DOGE has killed babies. They've also cut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which protects people from financial scams. It returned $20 billion directly to consumers that had been defrauded from them. And who knows how many billions of dollars it saved. And of course, we're looking at $500 billion less in tax collections this year because of the layoffs from the IRS. And so all of this is becoming less and less popular. People are becoming more and more frustrated with what Elon is doing, frustrated with the lack of respect that he has for our nation's civil servants. And so he's looking to step back. Let's play this clip.
The large slug of work necessary to get the DOGE team in place and working in the government to get the financial house in order is mostly done. So I think I'll continue to spend, a day or two per week on government matters for as long as the president would like me to do so, and as long as it is useful. But starting next month, I'll be allocating far more of my time to Tesla.
So there you go. Starting to crumble. And, it really is amazing that he's talking about, the large slug of the work has been done. And it's like, you started with a $2 trillion goal, and then you went down to a $1 trillion goal. And now you're saying maybe we'll hit $160 billion by the end of the fiscal year without, evidence of that, right? So, unmitigated failure is just to wrap this up and put it, call back to my assessment in response to Yaffe. The DOGE committee is an unmitigated failure, and it's starting to fall apart. And, whether or not you agree with that sentiment is not so much a reflection of, what is your opinion as can you perceive the world in which you exist? The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Joe Harrison, once more filling in for Adam and Jacob over the holidays. If you're tuning in online, go ahead and like the stream, subscribe to the channel, and if you're listening to us as a podcast, we hope that you'll consider giving us a 5-star review, because that goes a long way to help spreading the word. We're coming up on the end of the first half, but of course, if you want more, if you're not ready for this to end yet, jump onto YouTube, look up the Valley Labor Report, or you can also find us on Facebook, and you can continue watching, because we have a whole different second half of the show where we continue And we do have a great second half of the program lined up. We have some brand new pre-taped interviews, actually, one with a labor reporter on the state of home health care in the U.S., and another one, a really good interview with an organizer extraordinaire, according to Jacob, Jaz Brisack from the Starbucks Workers United campaign. And of course, we have been following as closely as we can everything that's been happening with the Starbucks stores. So if you have been a listener of the show or a watcher of the show, this will definitely be relevant to you, relevant information. But even if you haven't been, this is a good chance to sort of catch up on everything that is happening from a more inside source. So what have you thought so far about our compilation of DOGE coverage clips? Do you think we did a pretty good job, sort of analyzing and predicting where things were going to go and what was going to happen? Or do you think we missed the mark? Either way, we would love to hear from you. You can leave us a voicemail at any point throughout the week, 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Or, as always, you can use the contact form on our website, tvlr.fm/contact. But before we finish up, I've got one more clip that I'm going to play for you in this first half. So this is a fun one. This is an interesting one. This is a clip of a call that we got concerning our coverage. And, well, we had some fun with this one. So check it out.
Anonymous, what's your name? You can give a pseudonym and where are you calling from?
Hey, my name's Mark, and I'm in the Midwest.
Mark in the Midwest, what's on your mind?
Yeah, so I'm a federal employee, and I have no problem with DOGE investigating the waste and fraud within our agencies. And it's ironic that caller said wear red, white, and blue. You guys don't like the American flag at all. You actually defame it and face it. So the irony of doing that is just comical. I mean, you guys look like clowns.
We've done that before?
You're saying, don't audit us. Stop. Don't look in here. Yes, you have, especially at the recent anti-ICE rallies. I mean, you guys are constantly stomping on the American flag. How about the BLM riots as well? You guys are stomping all over the American flag as well.
I don't know who is. I don't know who you guys are when you're saying this kind of stuff, but I have not. I have not ever done anything like that. I have. I actually have.
Sure, you haven't.
Pin. I actually have an American flag pin that I wear on my suits sometimes, and so, I'm not totally sure. And I have actually on this program talked about. How I think there are really freaking cool things about the American experiment and that are really exciting, and how I am, to a good extent, proud to be an American, proud of the things that American people have done in our country, and proud to be an Alabamian, proud of things that Alabamians have done. Obviously not proud of everything, but I think that the legacy of the United States is a complicated one, and I think that you can kind of choose what you want to emphasize and stuff like that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being proud to be American and stuff like that.
So are you familiar with when Obama said we need to, investigate and, audit our agencies? When Bush did this as well, are you familiar with how the Democrat Party used to stand on all these issues? But then when the Republicans do it, it's like, oh, no, don't look here. Don't look in the closet. You can't look in there. Don't audit us. Stop. It's like, whoa, relax. We just want to see where the spending's going. We're an X amount of, debt. There's nothing wrong with looking into the agencies. You guys are acting like children, and you're going to throw rallies and protests against this? This is pathetic. You guys, this is the hill you're dying on. This is why the Democratic Party is losing. We're doing an audit to investigate fraud and wasteful spending. And you guys are like, stop,
Who's we, brother?
Democrat Party.
Yeah, what do you
guys? And by the way, you guys have more billionaires than the Republicans. So stop that.
You aren't auditing anything, brother.
Yeah.
Besides our chat and our show, I guess. And we appreciate your engagement as always.
You're welcome. You guys need a little bit of a lesson taught here. I mean, you guys just say, oh, billionaire Musk. You guys have Bill Gates, George Soros. How come you never talk about your billionaire? It's so ironic. It's just
this show talked about Bill Gates and how his influence on the American education system has been poisonous. Literally, like 30
So why aren't you talking about George
Soros?
Soros?
Billionaires should not exist.
Oh, but those are.
And by the way, what a
billionaires.
communist thought process saying billionaires should
I
not
thought
exist.
that you wanted
That
to wait
is
a second.
communist.
Do you want us to criticize our billionaires, or like so criticizing Bill Gates is communist?
No, you said we cannot have billionaires. Anything after this,
We should not
digit
have
should
billionaires.
be illegal.
That's
You
true.
said that.
Yes,
And
that's true.
and
No, we should. You
does
should
that
be
mean
allowed. You should
communism?
be allowed to make as much money as you want. Yes, that would be imposing communist tactics and not have billionaires. Yes.
What
In a
is
capitalist
communism?
society, you should be able to make as much as you can.
That's a good question.
China.
What-
I mean, that's the definition there.
Communism is when China.
Oh.
Okay.
Do they have billionaires in
Well, I would
China?
use China as an example.
Yeah, Mark, do they have billionaires in China?
I'm sure they do.
Huh.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm really lost.
So yeah, I'm
And
lost,
what's
Mark.
your point?
Okay. I'm just really
Okay,
lost.
So
I'm
going
not
back
sure
to the
where
point.
you're going
Oh no,
with this.
don't audit us. Stop. Don't audit. Well, the point is, like, you guys are freaking out over being audited. Agencies, like, relax. Like, we're looking into fraud investigation.
Thousands of people have lost
What's
their
wrong with
jobs
that?
already, dude.
Yeah, so Mark, the problem with
Okay,
I mean,
good.
I feel like I have
Some of
laid
them
out.
shouldn't have
Hold
it then.
on, you asked me the question. Why are we? And it's a good question. This is a good question. I thought I answered it earlier, but it's a question. Why are we not happy with what Musk is doing with his DOGE commission? And I laid out
Because you
some
have
of the
Elon
problems.
derangement syndrome.
Now hold on, Mark. I mean, you gotta let me respond. I laid out some of the reasons why. There are several. For one, it's actually not being transparent. There is not transparency with the DOGE commission. There is not a commitment to the truth. I just talked about 2 instances where there was just total lies, and it's not there's no transparency. There's no commitment to the truth from this commission. It's also, I've talked about in the past, being led by, racist teenagers. I think that is a problem when you have racist teenagers auditing the federal government. I think there are better people to do that. And there are significant
They're not
conflicts
racist
of
teenagers.
we'll get back to that in just a second. There are significant conflicts of interest with Elon Musk and the agencies that he is wanting to quote unquote audit, like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Federal Aviation Administration, the National Labor Relations Board, all agencies that have credibly alleged that Musk's companies have been violating the law. And so he obviously has a conflict of interest there and an interest in impeding the functioning of these agencies. And so nobody is opposed to finding waste, fraud, and abuse. There are inspector generals, which was actually one of the first things that Donald Trump did, is he fired a lot of the independent inspector generals in violation of the law, which was admitted to by Lindsey Graham, of all people, that the way that he let these inspector generals go was illegal.
He's a rhino.
The problem with this is that it is not transparent. There's no commitment to the truth. There are conflicts of interest. They are getting rid of the people whose job it is to do this kind of thing, and they are misleading the public. They are also, in their quote-unquote audit, they are pausing things that are hurting people in this country and across the world, and they are cutting jobs that they have no idea what the ramifications would be, like cutting and like firing and then rehiring people who work at the National Nuclear Security Administration. So there are a lot of problems with the way that it's going on, and it is also in service of a broader narrative that the public sector and federal workers are generally more wasteful, et cetera, than the public sector or than the private sector, which is just obviously not true. We have 6 affiliate radio stations, and the owner of one of the affiliate radio stations has now for 2 weeks in a row had some sort of malfunctioning with their FM radio signal. And I talked to people who work for these radio stations, and I have had some of them talk to me, and I have never had a conversation with one person that I'm thinking of in my mind about the radio where he does not talk about how stupid and inefficient, etc., his private corporation is that he works for. And so it's just not a fact that the public sector and federal workers are less efficient and et cetera, than the private sector. And all of this is in service of that broader narrative. So there's lots of reasons that I have a problem with this specific thing that is happening. Nobody has a problem with identifying waste, fraud, and abuse, and there are lots of things that the federal government does that I would oppose. But the way that it is being done, the people that are doing it, is problematic. It is going to hurt people. It is hurting people, not just federal workers, but the people that we serve. And it's not going to be good for the country. Does that answer the question? I mean, just like seriously level with me, Mark. Does that not compute?
You have more of a reasonable mind than the typical protester of what I've seen in headlines. I'll give you that.
Well,
but
then
the overall premise,
why
though,
do you lob these kinds of attacks, accusations at me and our program that you think exist? And I'm sure there are all sorts of crazy freaking people. Okay, I'm sure that some people actually believe the things that you think that we believe, but I know that you've been listening for a long time, and so like, why do you do that? Why do you do that? And with your admission that what I've just laid out is reasonable, I mean, I'm confused why you are so frustrated with our frustration.
Well, I think you just need to relax and let the audits go through. That's very normal. Let's have some transparency, and you can look what they're doing. You look at their X account on X, DOGE, Department of Efficiency. You can look up what they're posting and sharing. They talk about it all the time. They're not hiding anything. And did we need 87,000 more IRS agents? Doubt it. Remember when the Biden administration took on 87,000 more?
Yeah, we do.
To go after, the small people? No, we did not need. Oh, my God. There's the hill you're going to die on. You're going to die on saying we need more IRS agents.
Well, let's talk about those two things that you mentioned there, the X account, the Twitter account, and the IRS agents. Okay, I just laid out how on Twitter there's like zero commitment to the truth, and there is very minimal ability to verify some of the things that they are saying. And then a lot of the things that you can verify was already public on usaspending.gov or whatever the website is. A lot of this is already public information that they are, it's not, it is just not this kind of great, this innovative
level
thing
of
that people are making
exposure
out to be. It's repackaging already public information. And then secondly, the IRS agents. The IRS right now, I'm fairly confident, I've talked about this before, the IRS right now, I believe, and I caveat things when I'm not totally sure about it, but I believe that it has fewer employees now than it has in something like 50 years or a very long time. And what has happened as the IRS has lost employees is that it has a smaller percentage of the and the audits. We love audits now. We love audits. A smaller percentage of the audits that the IRS does has been in conjunction with the declining employment at the IRS. The percentage of the audits that the IRS does on wealthy people has also declined. Meaning that, and why that is that it is difficult to audit wealthy people, right? Because they have all sorts of people that can shield them from these sorts of things. And so you need more people to be able to perform these audits on wealthy folks. And so when you don't have enough people, then you go after the small fries who don't have those sorts of resources to fight back against the IRS. And so they go after so as the IRS has lost employees, the IRS has also been conducting a smaller and smaller percentage of these sorts of things on wealthy people. And so we need more audits on wealthy people. And so we need more IRS agents. Yes, I think that's true.
So just like how we need more audits to investigate agencies of government. Got it.
So we both agreed. We need more IRS agents?
I wouldn't fully agree. I would want a full audit of the IRS first, which DOGE is going to do. Then we'll take a look at it first.
Okay. All right.
Just
Thanks
like
for the
you
call, Mark.
said,
Appreciate it.
audits are good. Let's have audits for businesses.
I agree audits are good, and we should have more audits of businesses, particularly wealthy people, particularly like Elon Musk, whose financial disclosures are not going to be made public, despite the fact that he's rummaging around through the entire United
And also
States government.
Democrat billionaires as well.
We should have audits of all of this kind of stuff, but I do not
Elon Musk
trust
used to be a Democrat.
I do not trust Elon Musk to do these audits because of his past, interactions with the law. I do not think he is trustworthy, and because of his behavior with this DOGE commission, he has not proven himself trustworthy to conduct these sorts of
Would
things.
you trust him if he was a Democrat? Would you trust him if he had a D in front of his name?
No, you just heard me talking
I
about how
bet you would.
I don't think that Bill Gates should have $1 billion, and I think that Bill Gates has had a malevolent influence on this society. I was talking about how problematic Elon Musk was 3 or 4 years ago when he was union busting at Tesla, when he was still, by and large, perceived as a Democrat. I am unlike Mark. I think that you see the world first through politics and republicanism and conservatism. And I see the world first through as a member of the working class. Okay? And so we just and so I do not take a look at somebody, what letter they have next to their name, and decide if I'm going to think they are good or not because of that letter. Literally, the Alabama Democratic House minority leader, the leader of the Democrats in the Alabama State House, has me blocked on Twitter because of questions that I have asked him. Okay? I have zero loyalty to any sort of political party in the United States. I do not care. I care about working people, and Democrats and Republicans can both go pound sand as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think, it does not appear to me that you have like a similar engagement.
Who did you vote for?
I voted for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, that says a lot. So you like Tim Walz and you like tampons in the boys' bathroom? You're okay with that policy?
Also, I can also recognize, which apparently, because I voted apparently differently than you, you cannot hold, you can't hold two thoughts in your mind, right? I can believe that a person who voted for Donald Trump can have problems with this or that or the other thing that Donald Trump doesn't, and doesn't have to be a necessarily completely lockstep with the Republican agenda. I can believe that. And also, I can believe that people who vote for Democrats don't fall lockstep and with the Democratic agenda. I voted for Democrats. I voted for Republicans. I voted for libertarians before. Okay, and so I do what I think in all portions of my public life and my activism and my work within the union and everything like that. I try to do things that benefit working people. And I came to a different calculus than you on that one thing in 4 months ago. I think that after the past 3 weeks, I think that there's reason to believe that my choice made sense. But I mean that who I voted for has no bearing on this conversation.
Right. Well, let the audits flow.
All right, we'll pray for you, brother. Take care. Be safe on your route.
I'll pray for the Democratic Party as well, because we're going to find out.
They do need your prayers.
They could
do need
freaking use it. They could freaking use it. Thanks for your call, Mark. Appreciate it.
And that's going to be it for this first half of the program, folks. Thank you all so much for spending some time with us this morning. Just a few reminders before we wrap up. Definitely recommend you go to labornotes.org/events to check out options for free and low-cost trainings. Can't recommend that enough. And of course, we are super proud to remind folks that we are part of Means TV, a worker-owned streaming cooperative. And you can subscribe to Means TV with our discount code TVLR and receive 20% off either your first month or the first entire year. There are lots Lots of great programs on that site. I mentioned last week a documentary covering the unionization of a poultry plant in the South, and also one on the Amazon labor union campaign, so definitely relevant to people here in the South. Definitely check them out. If you're not on our email list, you are missing out, and you should rectify that. We've got exhaustive weekly roundups that we put out every week of the goings-on of labor in the South. That's our Last Week in Southern Labor newsletter and our Boss Watch newsletter, which is basically all about Southern employers being held accountable for doing all sorts of nasty things to employers like they want to do. So you can subscribe to those at tvlr.fm. We send those out weekly, usually on Monday and Tuesday. Once more, I recommend you check out our store, tvlr.fm/store. We've got some great hats, some stickers, a couple t-shirts. And of course, if you want to be part of helping us stay on the air, you can donate at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report, or go to tvlr.fm/donate. And as always, please let us know what you think of the show. Let us know if you have any thoughts. We're always up for hearing from y'all. 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can leave a voicemail at any time throughout the week, or as always, you can use the contact form on the website, tvlr.fm/contact. We're going to head into overtime, where we will be playing an interview Jacob did last week with Jaz Brisack and an independent labor reporter on home healthcare workers. So if you want to keep listening, look for us on YouTube or Facebook. But if you don't, thank you so much for your time. We'll see you next week, and Happy New Year. Solidarity forever.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Joe Harrison, the video producer and graphic designer, filling in for Adam and Jacob over the holiday break, and I definitely appreciate you spending some time with me today. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can do so anytime throughout the week, 844 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can also use our contact form, www.tvlr.fm/contact. We've got a couple of great pre-taped interviews that Jacob did lined up for you here, so we are going to dive right in. So first up, home care workers have long been left out of protections that many workers have taken for granted. So Jacob taped this interview last week with independent labor reporter Kalena Thomhave about how they had begun to secure certain protections. And of course, the Trump administration is threatening to roll them back.
We have on the line Kalena Thomhave, an independent labor reporter based out of Pittsburgh, to talk about her new piece in Capital and Maine titled "Home Care Workers Are Losing Minimum Wage Protections and Fighting Back." Kalena, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Really excited for this conversation. Enjoyed your piece. And just to start us off, could you talk about, give us a synopsis of home care workers? Like who are they and what do they do?
Sure. So home care workers are domestic workers who take care of people who need just a little bit of assistance to be able to live independently without being without having the need to move to a facility or an institution. So seniors, people with disabilities, they just need some help with maybe prepping their meals, bathing, dressing, cleaning, things like that. And so a care worker's role is really to provide that support to help people continue to live independently.
And they have been left out of a lot of labor regulations in the past, right? Can you explain that to the audience?
Yeah. So like all domestic workers, care workers were left out of the New Deal legislation in the 1930s that instituted our first labor regulations, right? And that was because domestic workers were largely Black women. And as we know, Black people in general were left specifically out of the New Deal in many labor protections. And so domestic workers were one of those industries. And then in the 70s, when domestic workers did finally win the right to the federal minimum wage and overtime protections, the government also instituted an exemption called the companionship exemption, which meant that employers could keep their workers from minimum wage and overtime if they classified them as companions rather than care workers. So like basically people who would just be providing fellowship and companionship rather than the essential services that I just described.
And so how do they, are people who are classified as like companions, are these typically people that have a direct relationship with the people that they're providing care for? Is it like a one to, like, you know, if you know, my grandmother, for instance, is actually, she has to get home care work, but we go through a company to pay, and so we got a company and we pay the company, and then the company pays the people to sit with her. If it was a situation where like we were going to pay my uncle to sit with him, is he a companion and the people that we pay through the company not a companion? Or like how does that work?
Yeah, so I would say that the family role in terms of companionship, in terms of this exemption, that we don't really need to consider the family role, right? Like you can be a care worker whether you're related to someone or not. And the companionship exemption was really instituted, at least I think of it, as people who are babysitters, right? Like it was an exemption to keep babysitters from federal minimum wage and overtime protections. But the problem is that mostly agencies, so like the company that you mentioned, mostly agencies can really exploit that loophole. And even if their workers are doing, medication management and bathing and dressing and all of these things that we count as care, and they're not just sitting with someone and talking with them, they might still be classified as a companion. And that's really what the Trump administration is doing, is widening that definition to make it even easier for companies to do so.
That seems, and I'm sure that the thing is just about trying to make it, to decrease costs for these corporations, but it would be one thing if or even if it was just somebody that we knew directly that wasn't family, that we were just going to kind of pay like on an ad hoc basis or whatever. If it's an informal arrangement between friends, then, I could understand why the government wouldn't want to say that I, as an individual, have to pay a friend time and a half to sit with her. But if I'm going out and hiring like a company, then it seems like the company should have to set, because they're not companions, even if they are just babysitters. If you got a whole kind of corporation around this thing, then they're people who are working for you. And so what was the justification even for this companion loophole at all, you think?
I mean, I think you're right that it's largely about people like performing the work of babysitters or just like sitting with someone, right? Like that's the way that I think about it, but it's been so easy to be exploited. And companies now, I mean, the reason why the Trump administration is proposing to widen the definition in the first place is because it's been lobbied so heavily by these home care agencies who hire people and then provide them as care workers, right? Like it's not that the Trump administration was trying to find ways to save you money, because 70% of long-term care is paid for by Medicaid. Like the savings are it's gonna go to home care agencies directly. It's not going to be felt by the people who need care.
And so the Trump administration is widening these, is making it easier to be classified as a quote unquote companion. How are they doing that?
Right. So this summer they proposed a rule. So it's not officially enacted yet, but they proposed a rule that would widen the definition to threaten minimum wage and overtime requirements. So it's a little complicated, but basically, home care workers finally won the right to federal minimum wage and overtime when the Obama administration restricted the companionship exemption and made it so that third-party agencies, like home care agencies, couldn't claim it. So they widened the definition. They restricted the definition of companionship, and they essentially defined care. Right? Like that's what the Obama administration did. They defined care, and they said that it was like meal prepping, bathing, dressing, minor housekeeping, things like that, right? Medication management, some things that you need to be skilled in, some things that you don't, but for the most part, these are really skilled workers. And so the Trump administration is reverting to the original definition of care, in which there's not really a definition. And so you could essentially, like medication management and doing like minor medical things for someone, you could still be classified by an agency as a companion.
And so, a big part of your article focuses on how home care workers are reacting to this rollback of their rights. Can you talk to us about some of the people that you talk to and what they're doing?
Yeah, so home care workers, whether they're unionized or not, are really organizing against this. And not just this, but also to make their jobs better in general. I talked to one worker in North Carolina who works for a home care agency, and she does not belong to a union, but she is an active member of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and they have done so much for domestic workers, really put the plight of domestic workers front and center. It's why the Obama I think they're a major reason why the Obama administration even struck down the companionship loophole in 2015. And so the National Domestic Workers Alliance has pushed hard against this, and also the unions throughout the country. SEIU is a big union representing home care workers. There's United Domestic Workers in California, and they actually helped push the California legislature to codify overtime protections in California state law, because if care workers lose their federal rights to minimum wage and overtime, then it'll be up to the state to protect those who fall through the cracks, right? Like, just like if you have a higher minimum wage than the federal minimum wage, then that is the wage that will be used. So in California now, as well as about half of the states, there will be protections at the state level for home care workers if this goes through. And unfortunately, it will probably go through because the Labor Department has already directed agency investigators to stop investigating companies for wage theft related to the companionship exemption.
Wow. And so really appreciate your reporting on this. And like I said, folks can find it in Capital in Maine. The title of the article is Home Care Workers Are Losing Minimum Wage Protections and Fighting Back. Is there anything else about the story that you think you would want to leave our audience with before we let you go?
Yeah, I think I would say that the state protection piece is one thing that I think about a lot. And I don't think that it should be up to states, obviously, to protect workers. But the fact that they can, I think, is really big. And there are 50 different states, right? So laws can be so different, and just, different by just a few words, and have so many different changes depending on the state. But I think that people could really push their state legislature to kind of like protect people who fall through the cracks. It's not ideal. I don't think it should be the state's responsibility, but the fact that option is there, I think, is really important, and that's something that people need to know about.
Kalena Thomhave, independent labor reporter out of Pittsburgh. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
We hope you enjoyed that interview on the rights of home health care workers. If you've got any thoughts, you can, of course, leave us a voicemail, 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Or send us a note through our contact form, tvlr.fm/contact. Now, all of y'all watching will be familiar with the Starbucks Workers United Union campaign, but you may not be as familiar with Jaz Brisack, one of the founders of the union. Jacob had the opportunity to pre-tape an interview with them a couple weeks back to talk about their upbringing, early union organizer career, the Starbucks campaign, their book, and what they're up to now. It's a really great interview, and I hope you enjoy it, so we're going to play that now.
You are listening to the Valley Labor Report, and we are joined by Jaz Brisack, organizer extraordinaire, got their start in Mississippi, union organizing, which I've known they were from the South for a very long time, but did not realize that their first campaign was at the UAW Nissan campaign. So really excited for this conversation to talk about their work and their new book, Get on the Job and Organize. Jaz Brisack, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks so much for having me, and so cool to be on this after seeing all the coverage y'all have been doing of so many campaigns over the years.
Well, appreciate it. Coming from you, it really does mean a lot. And we'll start with your early life, if you're fine with that. Was there anything kind of in your childhood or growing up that generated an interest in unions and organizing? Because, growing up in the South, obviously it's not a huge part of the culture. And so I'm curious, what was the thing that kind of sparked your interest?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a big question. I think there's a few different threads, probably. I should say, growing up, I didn't know that unions were really a thing. I my family had many threads going on. My mom was sort of a white Southern populist type. My dad had immigrated from India and part Indian, part Romanian. But neither side of the family, coming, from different traditions, had any real experience with unions. I think my grandmother had been in the teachers union, but by the time I was growing up, I grew up homeschooled. My parents ended up separating, and my mom's quite religious, quite sort of conservative with a little c. Values very much were dominant in my upbringing. And, I think there's a lot of ways that upbringing ended up making me, very much interested in reshaping power dynamics. I became an atheist pretty early, which was not a very popular move in my family. At that time, we were living in East Tennessee, not too far from where the Scopes monkey trial had happened. And I got really into the Scopes monkey trial, was reading Inherit the Wind a lot, learned everything I could about Clarence Darrow. And it was through Clarence Darrow that I found out about Eugene Debs. And the first thing I read about Debs was the "While there is a lower class, I am in it. While there is a criminal element, I am of it. While there is a soul in prison, I am not free" speech. And that kind of changed my life. Like, that was the first time I'd really heard about solidarity. I would have denied this then, but I'm self-aware enough now to admit that, probably some of the fundamentalist things that I had been brought up with, I took pretty literally. And so coming to that understanding of solidarity sort of aligned a lot of things that I had been taught and then seen not really put into practice.
That's fascinating, and that's a much better road to go down than I think some of the maybe new atheist folks went down. So.
I was an old atheist. I was reading Robert Ingersoll and Charles Bradlaugh, who actually wasn't very pro-labor, but I didn't know that at that time. And then, I was an old atheist. I didn't have internet for a lot of my childhood. So I was reading old-fashioned books and sometimes downloading things from Project Gutenberg at the library.
Like the Dawkins, the Four Horsemen, they did not play into your like deconstruction, as they call it these days, at all.
No, thank God that I don't believe
that's fascinating, because that you're the age that would have, right? I mean, if you don't mind,
I'm 28.
You're 28, yeah. So I guess that would have been about the time that you were kind of,
no, a lot of my friends went in that pathway, and thankfully most of them came out leftists. But I think it was, growing up homeschooled without a lot of internet, I just went into, literature rabbit holes and
Okay. So that is fascinating. I mean, a lot of times a critique of homeschooling is it can kind of make you a little bit antisocial, but being homeschooled in this case kept you from a very antisocial sort of political religious pipeline.
I mean, I'm not defending it. I would not recommend that anyone else be homeschooled. But I do think certainly, I've had to overcome some of the social awkwardness that does come with it. But I was spared the YouTube rabbit holes, perhaps.
And so, even if it was not, and it doesn't sound like there was much one way or the other really about unions, and there's a lot that I recognize in that background. I wasn't homeschooled, but my parents were very, very religious. There's like a specific brand of Pentecostalism in North Alabama that is how I grew up, and so they weren't even so much political as like religious. And so I recognize some of that, and with respect to unions, it was kind of like you said, like there was just nothing in the air or in the conversation about it at all. And so was that the case both inside and outside of your family? There was just kind of an absence of discussion about unions until you started kind of doing your own reading about stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I had my my mom had worn an Emma Goldman t-shirt when I was a kid, but it was like, and if I can't dance, I don't want your revolution kind of take. There were maybe little whispers. I think we watched Waiting for Superman, and I didn't know that it was Koch brother funded and, designed to be a hit piece on teachers' unions until much later. So maybe there were, sort of like unions were good for coal miners and Mother Jones was cool, but like, this doesn't have any bearing on our lives today. My mom had been a private school teacher for a little while, and she was like, we didn't get paid as much as unionized teachers, but we also got free croissants. And so,
wow.
the trade-offs.
Yeah, the pizza of private schools, I suppose.
Exactly.
Okay, well, and so that and so it was really kind of your own sort of self-study and your own experience outside of kind of your social circles that pushed you towards unionism.
I mean, I will say I had no idea until I got to college and had a journalism professor named Joe Atkins at the University of Mississippi who was like, hey, you're really into all of this stuff. Did you know that you can do that? That it really became real to me. So, my knowledge of the labor movement really began with the Knights of Labor and ended with the Wobblies. And I kind of thought the Palmer raids were it. So Joe was able to be like, here's Operation Dixie and the CIO history, and here's an intro to Richard Bensinger, who's working on the Nissan campaign currently. And so through Joe, I kind of learned, okay, like unions had this history, obviously a checkered one sometimes, and certainly one that was very filled with defeat, especially in the South, but also it hadn't ended with the Wobblies. It was continuing, and Joe was hosting meetings on campus for students to get involved with supporting the Nissan campaign. And so I got involved with that freshman year, and then, was very lucky to kind of get to actually work on that campaign.
And I want to talk to you about some of the lessons that you learned from that campaign. But before that, I guess, what was it that you read about unions that convinced you that it is the way that I read what I've read from you and that I kind of interpret your work is that you feel like unions and the labor movement are a uniquely valuable institution in the social landscape and the political landscape of the country. And that's an opinion that I came to as well. I got kind of the political bug before I got the union bug. And I came to it because I became disillusioned with the electoral stuff. But what was it in the reading and in maybe talking to Bensinger and some of your first conversations? But what was the thing that kind of clicked for you and said that unions are uniquely valuable, and that's kind of what I want to spend a big portion of my life working on?
I mean, this sounds very silly in a way, but I think I didn't read that much about the theory of this or really the philosophy of the labor movement until later. But reading Eugene Debs' speeches and then reading things like the Little Red Songbook and the Industrial Workers of the World preamble was very moving to me. And the idea that this was the only place where workers would really have self-determination over their own lives. I mean, I had worked at Panera Bread. That was not a good time. I had seen sort of what the high control environment of the workplace looked like. And I grew up in a high control environment. So I think there were parallels between, the home environment and the workplace environment that were, why should people be putting up with that kind of unilateral control over their lives? And the Wobblies, were very much strong believers in this is our only way to make a different world. We can build the new world in the shell of the old, and unions can really take over the administration of society and fill the roles that the state and capital, and of course, a lot of overlap between the state and capital, are currently filling. And so, I mean, I will say I spent a lot of time doing Democratic Party stuff in Mississippi before I got totally disillusioned with that. So it wasn't a hard one thing or the other at first, but I think the labor movement was my first real love, just because, and I still think it's the only real place where workers can truly have self-determination.
And so, after or kind of as you're coming to that decision, you start working on the UAW campaign at Nissan. And, can you, for folks who, haven't read any of the, the reports of that campaign or don't know kind of that history, can you remind people a little bit about sort of the general contours of the campaign? What were some of the strategies that the UAW employed? And then what was your experience like personally working on the campaign?
Yeah, so this was a 14-year campaign. It was part of the UAW's attempts to organize Southern transnationals, just as we're seeing now with VW and Mercedes and a lot of the other Southern plants that the UAW is attempting to organize, starting with Bob King becoming UAW president and bringing in Richard Bensinger. The UAW had tried to really commit to organizing and forcing companies to sign the Fair Election Principles, which was a code of corporate conduct that Richard had helped develop that basically said, we're not just going to do everything we can get away with under the current labor law framework, but we'll actually commit to equal time to a fair process for workers to decide whether or not to unionize. And so, they had sort of made attempts at Toyota, at other companies, but Nissan was sort of the last campaign that the UAW would run under that era. This was unfortunately the era of Dennis Williams, who was the president by the time we were voting at Nissan, who went to prison. So there was a shift away from the focus on the right to organize and toward, all of the golf course mansions and other things that were occupying Dennis Williams' brain. But I think the real question, and, this was a real takeaway from Nissan, was, you couldn't just have a really amazing committee and then expect that committee to be able to overcome every union busting trick that a company could throw at it. You had to also have the leverage to force a company to respect the right to organize. Right before I got involved with the campaign, a worker named Derek Whiting had collapsed and died on the shop floor. He collapsed across the line. The company kept all the other lines around him running. I talked to a worker who had been there that night and seen this happen. And it really seared into my brain that this was a life and death fight. Like, workers were dying in this plant. It was preventable. And if we could win a union at Nissan, then we could hopefully empower workers to be able to save their own lives and also prove that we could do it in Mississippi. And if you could do it there, you could do it anywhere. I mean, it was incredibly formative for me. I was house calling workers. I was talking to people who had had various industrial accidents in the plant. And the leverage to win the right to organize existed. Nissan was majority owned by Renault, which Renault was majority owned by the French government. And so, there was an angle to try to get the French government to force Nissan to abide by the Fair Election Principles and stop union busting in the plant. Nissan was also marketing itself as a very progressive company. They were cutting checks to environmental groups and civil rights groups and sponsoring pride parades. And so, had we taken the fight to the dealerships, Richard had a strategy to try to boycott the company, send people, student groups, church groups, et cetera, to dealerships. And the trials of that were very successful. But the UAW would never commit to actually having that fight and trying to win the right to organize. So they just sort of had a vote that they knew would likely be losing as a as a strategy to end the campaign.
And so what was that experience like personally? I don't know if there are any particular stories that stick out to you, or other conversations that you had, as you tried to work on that campaign, and what were some of the lessons that you took from Mississippi?
I mean, I think everything that I've seen on every campaign since was sort of contained in the Nissan campaign. We were fighting, a company that would stop at nothing, that had the entire, white supremacist power structure of the Mississippi state government on its side. I saw prison labor being used to pick up the union signs that we had put up around the plant. And they had hired Littler Mendelsohn, the same union busting law firm Starbucks would use, to try to divide workers on racial lines, on gender lines, to try to scare temp workers and make full-time workers feel like they had to protect what they had. I think the union busting playbook was sort of encapsulated in what Nissan did there. For me, it was, every ounce of energy that all of us had. Richard and I and another organizer were like shoved into these, couple of desks pushed together, and we were, going to the shift meetings and then house calling and then editing video footage and then, compiling health and safety reports, like at all hours of the day. If we could have won that campaign on the basis of having an incredibly dedicated organizing committee and incredibly impressive people who were, willing to do anything to make this work, we would have won. But it really proved you had to win the right to organize. Like that's not just rhetorical. That is how you win. It should not require people to walk a minefield to organize a union. And if you do expect that people will walk a minefield, you're likely to lose.
That's interesting. I want to get to Starbucks in a moment, but I guess how do you having the right to organize is obviously like a very, very it makes organizing much less difficult, but I guess and where you have options to really try to pull on those levers like you did with Renault and the French government. I think it's a real shame that those weren't pursued more in that case. But in a lot of cases, maybe the levers don't exist, except for potentially having the government enforce the right to organize. And unfortunately, at this point in the United States, or in a state like Mississippi, that is a difficult thing. And so if having the right to organize is such an important piece to running a successful campaign. I guess I'm curious what you think that says about the prospects for organizing the South, more generally.
I think the leverage exists more often than not. I mean, I think there's obviously companies like Amazon where it seems like they're so big and so used to operating parts of the business at a loss to undercut competitors, et cetera, that, winning the right to organize at Amazon is, going to take a insane amount of coordination and resources. With Nissan, I think the key was the boycott, the dealership campaign. I think the French government could have been very useful, but I think taking the fight to consumers who believed that Nissan, they were marketing themselves as a progressive company. They were marketing themselves to young people, to Black people, to folks that they thought were, their target demographic were people who I think would have been quite receptive to a consumer campaign. With Starbucks, this is a company that people aren't patronizing Starbucks because it's the best coffee. It is not the best coffee. They're patronizing Starbucks because they think that it represents something else. Like they call themselves a different kind of company. They've made a reputation out of, allegedly offering much better benefits than the competition, which there's some truth to that. The bar is in hell in the service industry. And so, and they've also been really successful in marketing themselves as a safe space for, queer people, trans people, et cetera. which of course they would very much weaponize against workers during the union campaign. But I think on most of these campaigns, and I think, everything from Trader Joe's to REI to Chipotle, we've seen all these campaigns at companies that have significant brand vulnerabilities. And there's a few success stories. I think Barnes & Noble just, the RWDSU was able to get a contract at Barnes & Noble's by using the company's brand image consciousness against it. But I think in a lot of ways we've seen a real hesitation around calling the question on will the public actually rally around boycotting these companies until we can win the right to organize.
Mm. And so that brings us to Starbucks. I don't think that it was that you immediately went from Nissan to Starbucks. I think there was a little bit in between. But,
yeah.
Can you talk to us about the start of the Starbucks campaign and what made you decide that was a good target and why organizing Starbucks and other retail and food service spaces are an urgent task for the labor movement?
Yeah, so Richard was commuting back and forth during the Nissan campaign, working both, with the Nissan workers and then with this group of baristas in Ithaca at a company called Gimme Coffee. And they weren't the first baristas union to ever exist, but when they organized in 2017, they were the only certified baristas union in the country. And so after we lost at Nissan and I was trying to figure out how to keep going in the fight, to organize more workers and stay involved with labor, I ended up going up to upstate New York to try to work with Richard on what had become a industrial union project to organize not just one hot shop in the coffee industry, but to try to organize geographically all of the baristas and have the leverage to bring multiple companies to the table at once so that maybe we could win not just wage improvements, but also healthcare, also other things that would sort of change the industry. Because it had literally zero union density. And so the conditions were really terrible. So I ended up working on a campaign to unionize Spot Coffee, which was a regional chain in Rochester and Buffalo. We did win after a consumer boycott that held the company accountable when they fired 3 of the 6 people who came to the first organizing committee meeting in Buffalo in retaliation for organizing. Within about 6 weeks, the company signed the fair election principles, reversed course. We were able to win the election and negotiate a good first contract. And so suddenly we had this base of about 125 baristas in Buffalo. And there was a revolving door between Spot Coffee and Starbucks. Like people were living together, people were partners or roommates or friends, or sometimes, they had worked at one company and then switched to the other. So there was a ton of overlap. I talked to a worker named Benny, who was the former partner of one of the Spot Coffee workers, who was working at the University of Buffalo location and wanted to organize a union for a lot of reasons. The conditions weren't great. Starbucks was also really into serving coffee with a cop. And Benny wanted the right to refuse service to cops, which they did not have. But they started talking to their coworkers and they were fired. And so that was really a lesson to me in terms of, what companies would do and what Starbucks would do if they found out that people were talking union. Benny was fired supposedly for cursing on the floor. And I can tell you, Starbucks does not fire people for cursing on the floor. They would have no more baristas left. But this was the beginning of the pandemic and the beginning of the Trump NLRB. We were pretty sure that we would not be able to win justice for Benny through the courts, and the pandemic made boycotting very difficult. So we sort of had to regroup on our strategic focus. I ended up deciding to get a job at Starbucks, largely because the pandemic was making it very hard to talk to workers in any other way. And I didn't want more people getting fired if I was meeting with them and then they were going back into the workplace and talking union. So I ended up getting a job and then recruiting more folks to get jobs with the goal of being able to build strong enough relationships that we could preempt that kind of union busting.
And that's you had a conversation a few months ago with Adam Conover, and he titled the video "Union Spy" or something like that. And you've talked some about your experience salting at Starbucks. I'm curious if you have anything else to say about, and I mean, that really kind of goes to the title of your book, which we'll talk about later. Get on the job and organize. What do you have to say about that as a strategy, getting on the job and organizing from within rather than being an external union staffer trying to kind of support an internal committee that you're not a part of? What did you learn about that strategy by doing it yourself?
I mean, I will say, I think the labor movement was built by folks who were working in a workplace and trying to organize. And I don't think there's been historically really much of a distinction between people who are working and people who are trying to organize. Like, you didn't have budgets to have a lot of staff organizers or sometimes any staff organizers. And people who were working jobs were often, you needed to work somewhere. So why not get a job at a place that you wanted to try to help organize? The title of the book was taken from the slogan of the industrial workers of the world in 1917, which was get on the job and organize. They were very much encouraging folks, and a lot of their workers, a lot of their base was, were migrant workers or itinerant workers or folks who were getting jobs through agencies. And so, they would try to get jobs in a specific harvest or a specific lumber yard, you name it. But, the garment workers unions that Workers United would sort of grow out of were doing very similar things with sweatshop organizing, where, Rochester, New York became 100% union by basically workers at unionized sweatshops would go and help organize workers at other sweatshops, including by strategically getting jobs. So there wasn't really this sort of sharp distinction. And I'd been working, at Panera Bread. There's a real Panera Bread to Starbucks pipeline too, which was really interesting to learn about. I think I wanted the experience, not just it is a very effective way to organize, but I also wanted to know what it was like to try to organize your own workplace. And I think I'm back to being an external organizer now, but certainly that has really been helpful in terms of being able to talk to folks who are organizing their own workplaces, whether they're salts or folks who are already there.
And can you talk a little bit about what it was like being inside Starbucks and starting the campaign and actually kind of, pulling the trigger and filing the election, getting people to where they were ready to file for an election, and bringing us up to where the campaign is today?
It was exhilarating. It was the most exciting thing that I've ever been part of. And it felt, it was so incredible to be, experiencing the camaraderie of organizing with your coworkers in the workplace, building those kinds of friendships, seeing, too, sometimes your friends weren't the people who were the most pro-union. The person I was closest to was not on board. And when she finally became on board months later, it wasn't me that did that. But it was really important to sort of be able to separate friendships from union support. And I think, you don't want to have a transactional relationship. So that's really important. If you're salting, the relationships come before the union. You're not doing it with that goal. But the only way that you're going to be able to organize is if you build trust and camaraderie and that depth of relationship. So I will say, I didn't end up being the key leader in my store, but I was able to recruit folks who'd been there for 12 years like Michelle, or 9 years like JP, or 15 years like Stephen, to join the organizing committee and help get the campaign rolling, or become quiet supporters who are sort of helping us behind the scenes. And so I think it was so amazing. Starbucks responded with a pretty intense union busting campaign. They sent hundreds of managers and executives into Buffalo, including Howard Schultz, who had talked to us about the Holocaust and how the Holocaust meant we shouldn't unionize. That was a pretty wild day.
Were you actually in the room for that?
Oh yeah.
Wow. That
Yeah, no,
must I mean
was
it's surreal hearing it on Twitter, but I can't imagine actually like watching him
it was a
physically in the room.
gift. It was
Yeah.
such a gift. I mean, that night, so there we ended up filing, we went public with a committee. The goal was to organize as many stores in Buffalo as we possibly could, ideally all of them. We didn't have equal support, so we filed for elections at 3 stores where we had either unanimous support or, overwhelming supermajorities. And the union busting really cost us our support at Camp Road. It made my store, we held pretty strong, but it was always sort of up in the air. And then Genesee Street was flipping back and forth. We didn't know how they were going to go. And so that night, workers at Genesee who had been sort of flipping back and forth between being pro-union initially and then succumbing to how intense and stressful the union busting was making the store environment. People listened to Howard and were like, oh my God, whatever that guy says, I want to do the opposite. So when he was talking about, how he had experienced the shame and the scars of being poor, people were like, well, we're poor and we're not ashamed of this. When he was talking about sharing his blanket like a Holocaust prisoner, people were Googling Howard Schultz net worth. It was $4.8 billion. People were like, oh my God, is he going to share his billions of dollars with us? So, they always say the boss is the best organizer, but Howard Schultz is the best boss organizer of them all. Yeah, I mean, our idea with the Starbucks campaign had been very similar to how we had won at Spot. Obviously, a much bigger company. Starbucks had 10,000 locations. So we didn't think that we were going to be able to unionize enough stores that the leverage would be, a strike or some kind of job action. We thought we would need to boycott the majority of stores and bring public opinion to bear against the company, sort of call the question on, the gulf between how Starbucks marketed itself as this different progressive company and their actions, which, very quickly began to include firing whistleblowers for talking about union busting, firing entire organizing committees, including the Memphis 7, who were the most racially diverse organizing committee in the country at that time, who had gone public on MLK Day and asked Starbucks not to bring their union busting to Memphis, closing stores across the country, including in Ithaca, which became the first city to have 100% unionized Starbucks locations, and they closed every store in retaliation for workers organizing there. I mean, I think the campaign has been, in this struggle for 4 years. December 9th was the 4-year anniversary of us winning the election at my store in Buffalo and Genesee Street. And we've been trying to figure out how to get a contract and how to actually force Starbucks to respect the right to organize for that whole time. I think the campaign in some ways is in a very different place than it was, and has become a bit more centralized, especially in terms of decision making. But there's an incredibly amazing and resilient group of workers who are still fighting and still doing everything possible to actually win a union contract and ensure justice, not just at the union stores, but across the entire company, and to win the right to organize at all 10,000 stores. And so, I think the union's closer to calling for a boycott than at any point previously. I think certainly, we got a lot of grassroots organic momentum around a boycott over the union supporting solidarity with Palestine in 2023. I think, there's a longer conversation there. I think it would have been amazing if union leadership had sort of jumped on that momentum, but I think it's encouraging that there's more talk of holding Starbucks accountable through a boycott now, and certainly, the law was not going to save us. So we've got to resort to other means.
Now they have called at this point for a boycott, at least during the strike, right?
Sort of. I think they are saying don't go to Starbucks during the strike. But I think there's been a bit of a hesitation around calling for a boycott or using the terms.
Interesting. Okay. And I can say that I don't know. I mean, it must be public. But as a principal officer of a labor federation, I have gotten direction from the AFL-CIO to, or encouragement to support non-union stores. They're passing on information that Starbucks Workers United is calling on other unions to leaflet at non-union stores. So, I think that hopefully that'll yield some results when we're working on planning some actions here in North Alabama around that. And so, I guess that kind of brings us to today, and your book was released this year, and so I'm curious what was the thing that made you decide to kind of turn some of your experiences into a book?
I mean, I really wanted and would love for more people to be able to understand, organizing a union isn't rocket science. If we could do it, anybody can do it. And so I sort of wanted to lay out the blueprint of the Starbucks Workers United campaign, how salting works. I think there's often been a culture of we don't talk about salting, and we were outed as salts by folks within the union, other union staffers who were trying to sort of discredit the Buffalo Organizing Committee. And so we learned very quickly if people heard a negative spin on it, they had a lot of suspicion. And if people heard from us why we had decided to do it, there wasn't that negative understanding of it. It was like, yes, that's great. And, you're not really different from any other worker, but you had a leg up in understanding how to get something rolling and get the union in. So I think I wanted to help more people understand how they could organize their own workplaces, and also understand what salting is and how it's a really amazing pathway to learn organizing from the inside out and get into the labor movement.
Sort of a organizing in the steel industry for the 21st century.
Exactly.
People's World, I read part of their review of your book, and they said that it offers lessons on balancing a radical vision with practical discipline. And that is somebody that kind of, you mentioned earlier in our conversation that you didn't start with a bunch of like heady theory and you just kind of pretty quickly became convinced that workers should have more autonomy and should have more control. And that's, maybe not the beginning and end of it, but that's, pretty close to being, that's like 80% there to your politics. And, but there's a certain amount of that is kind of radical, while also needing to have practical discipline about, maybe, and you mentioned Renault, that made me think of another book that was released recently. And I can't recall the title of the book, but it was about this fellow who got involved in organizing in the 70s at American Motors. And he talked about how, like, after 10 years on the job or something, he had gotten to a place where he was on the bargaining committee, and he's a radical. He came out of the socialist anti-war movements and stuff, and he really considered himself, very, very militant and everything like that. And he was in a place where on the bargaining committee during this contract, he felt like it was his responsibility to recommend a contract that was not ideal, because that's kind of like where things were. And so I don't know how much you go into that in your book about dealing with, being a radical or a militant or, people, a person with anti-capitalist politics, while also having to deal with the system as it is, and recognizing the limits and the cliffs that you don't want people to kind of lead themselves over because they don't know that there's a cliff there, right? And so I'm curious because unfortunately I've not been able to read the book yet. And so what are those lessons that you offer in the book about balancing a radical vision where workers run the world, not just in the kind of, physically we build the wheels, but also we decide where the wheels are going to go. Like that's the vision, with the practical reality of where we're at and the steps that we need to take to get there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think maybe there's a couple threads here where in the conclusion, I try to talk about sort of the way that my views evolved from the Spot Coffee campaign, where I thought all companies were fundamentally the same, and therefore, all folks who were sitting on the other side of the bargaining table were the same. And then kind of fast forwarding to Ben and Jerry's, where here was a company that signed the fair election principles, not because they were so pure, but because they read the room and they understood it was better for their brand image if they became the anti-Starbucks and voluntarily recognized the union. We had unanimous support, so that it wasn't going to be advantageous to them to try to union bust, especially given how they market themselves. But that put me in the position of trying to negotiate a contract at a company where our leverage was their positive image of themselves. And so that meant that if we did certain things like strike, we might lose leverage, where bad publicity for the company actually undermined the hammer that we had of the company not wanting bad publicity. And so that was a really interesting and complicated role to navigate as somebody who, has often said the wobbly catchphrase, the working class and the owning class have nothing in common. So I think I've kind of come to realize, you can't fight every battle all of the time. Union density is at its lowest point since we started keeping track of those numbers. We're at 5.9% in the private sector. And sometimes you've got to have a Ben and Jerry's to keep the momentum going, to fight the Starbucks and fight, the Teslas and fight everybody else. I think I found it a little bit funny in the People's World article, where I think they included some of the tensions with union leadership around control of the Starbucks campaign and the direction of the Tesla campaign, with sort of too anarchist or too radical of a outlook. And maybe I plead guilty to that one. I think centralization is typically not what we're fighting for. We're fighting for workers to really have power and autonomy. And I think workers should be allowed to pick what union they're organizing with, if that's to the Tesla situation, and then have a real input on what strategies might bring the company to the bargaining table at Starbucks. And so I think, maybe there's certain places where, certainly it was advantageous to be able to talk to workers about, if you organize with us, like we have a union backing us and we're not just jumping off a cliff. But I think the more we can have unions function as semi-autonomous, semi-independent unions with actual resources, the better.
And so what you're doing many things at this point, but one of the ways that people can kind of get most plugged in to some of the work that you're doing is around the Inside Organizer School. Can you talk to us about maybe how that grew out of the Starbucks campaign, or actually, I think it preceded it. I think the Inside Organizer School preceded the Starbucks campaign. And so how did that start? What's going on now, and how can people learn more?
Yeah, so Richard and Chris Townsend, who I know has been a regular on this program, co-founded the Inside Organizer School in 2018. I was lucky to be in that original group of organizers who were helping pull it together. And it was really where I learned a lot of the tools that I would use as a SALT at Starbucks. It was the foundation of the Starbucks campaign strategically in terms of how we would train folks who are going to be organizing first as SALTs, and then the partners, Starbucks calls workers partners. So the partners who are going to be the partner on point folks who are mentoring other workers reaching out across the country. And basically, it's sort of how do you launch a union campaign in your own workplace in a way that condenses the time frame from when you go public to when you're able to file. How do you get enough leverage on the company to win the right to organize? Obviously, there's no answer to this that's going to work on every single union campaign, but it's sort of pulling together folks to strategize together across industries, across unions about what's going to work, and to train folks to get jobs or go back into their workplaces and have the best chance at organizing. And so would love to talk to folks who are interested in coming to an Inside Organizer school or becoming an Inside Organizer. You can find out a ton more about the school and get in touch with us at insideorganizerschool.org.
All right. Well, Jaz Brisack, really appreciate your time. Thank you for making your time, for making the time. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave our audience with before we let you go?
So great to be on this, and have been an admirer of the Valley Labor Report for a long time. But I think we covered a lot, hope to get more folks to Inside Organizer School soon. We're planning some in Tennessee, and hopefully soon after that in Alabama and elsewhere.
All right. Well, we look forward to it. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's program. Thank you so much for spending some time with me as we looked over the tragic destruction of the Department of Government Efficiency, as well as some great interviews about the home healthcare workers and the Starbucks Workers United campaign. As we are wrapping up, I want to once again take this opportunity to remind folks to check out labornotes.org/events for free and low-cost trainings. And again, just want to say that we are really excited and proud to be part of Means TV, which is a worker-owned streaming cooperative. And you can subscribe to Means TV with our discount code TVLR and get 20% off either your first month or your first entire year. Again, lots of great programs on there. Definitely cannot recommend it enough. If you're not on our email list, you're missing out, because we have two really great newsletters that we send out every week. Last Week in Southern Labor, which is a exhaustive weekly roundup of the goings-on of labor in the South. And then we also have Boss Watch, which is basically all about Southern employers being held accountable for, things like injuring and killing and otherwise breaking the law against their workers. So you can subscribe to those at tvlr.fm. You can also check out past entries there, since we publish them all as articles on the site. Again, check out our store, tvlr.fm/store. We've got some great hats and stickers and t-shirts. And as always, if you want to be part of helping us stay on the air, you can donate at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report or tvlr.fm/donate. As always, we love to hear from you. You can leave us a voicemail at any time throughout the week. 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Or you can use our contact form on the website, tvlr.fm/contact. That is going to do it. We will see you next week. We will be back to being live next episode. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you all have a wonderful new year. All power to the workers.